Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining a wonderful session on business outlook of the future. We have amazing business leaders from different parts of the world. And let me please introduce Miss Julie Sloan. She is the CEO of Workforce Planning Global. She's an international expert in strategy and worked for at least 16 countries where she built the capabilities for them. She has also an author of three books, which is in the same topic and same area of the work. Additionally, she has received many awards, including the Meritorious Contribution Award and Medal of the Order of Australia. Please join me in welcoming Julie Sloan. Julie, hi. Thank you
Hi,
so much for joining us.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right. So, yep. Moving on, we have another important and very uh, true leader, Mr. Mujeeb Zahur. He's a managing director of Islamabad site along with Philippines and Argentina for S&P Global Marketing Intelligence. He worked closely with leaders from various functions, including content, technology, client support, sales, and account management in his new role. In his role, he's a vice president Pasha, which is actually Pakistan Software House Association, and he's working closely for ICT in Pakistan post COVID-19. He will share a few perspective about that as well. We welcome you, Mujeeb. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ali. Pleasure to be here.
And yep, so we got our third panelist. I think she just messaged she will be joining in few minutes time. I think. Meanwhile, I think we can. So I'll introduce once she'll join. She is Helen Argyrou. She is basically a female leader of the future. So I'll welcome her properly when she will join. So yep. So the topic about it is like, so the AIM Consulting. So my name is basically Ali Ghazanfar, and I'm the CEO of AIM Consulting. So what we do, we organize actionable business engagement. So even these webinars, we make sure that we generate actions for the audience. So we make it interactive, engaging, and make sure that people get some activities and action which they can use in their professional life. So I'll share a little bit the research with you. Uh, as per research, 80% of the audience are disengaged. The reason being there's a too much of the information. And then there's only 10% of the retention of the information. Whenever we hear something, whenever we talk in certain areas, after 7 days, we forget 90% of the information. So retention is very less. So these are the factors which we actually taken care while designing this webinar. So what will be the focus today? Focus will be on working on subconscious mind of the people, whatever the cravings of the participants, and we will deliver our points, actions accordingly. So based on that, the architecture of this webinar is 4 steps. First of all, we'll have only few points to talk so that people get more understanding about it. So first of all, for those topics, we'll get a panelist view. So we got amazing panelists with us. And then for each of the topic, we'll have a question and answer session. So it will not be, it's a non-traditional. It won't be like we'll have 40 minutes of conversation and at the end of the session, we'll have few questions. Rather, we'll have first topic, question answer, moving on to the second topic, question answer, so that we comprehend the learning. Lastly, we'll talk about the key takeaways. So last part of the session will be the takeaways, where you will get a chance to share what is the one action which you as an audience and the participants are bringing back to your organization. And last but not the least, as I just mentioned, that within 7 days of time, 90% of the information is forgotten. So there should be some post activity. The post activity will be shared after the webinar, which you will be sharing with us in due course of time. So these are the 4 steps which will be going ahead. So yeah, so we would like to start it with you. So quickly, we would like to know what is one key expectation from today's session. You can just put it in the chat box quickly, and our panelists would be happy to know what are your thoughts about today's session. So please feel free to put in the chat box. We will review the chat box. Yeah, so here we, yeah, so we got the first one. Yeah, so somebody has written a message. What will be the new normal that will impact business world after COVID-19? That's interesting. I think we will talk about it. Yeah, so what will be the new normal? That's interesting because with the senior leaders sitting in the panel, I think that's a good area to talk about. Yeah. So what else? What else? Yeah. So we got another one: how to deal with shyness while facing big audience. Oh yeah, that's. I think that's. So we will have it, but it might not be part of this dialogue. We might arrange another one later. Yeah, so we got another one. Yeah, so the other one is, so future of hospitality, how when there's airlines and when there are social distancing, so hoteling and airline businesses, how do you think the impact will be on that? Yeah, so yep, good. Aviation industry post lockdown. Yeah, we got another one: establish goals in the new world and how to reach them. Yeah, goals in the, what are the big opportunity that you see post COVID episode? Okay, okay. So I think that's giving a good perspective to our panelists, like how is the thinking pattern from the participants. With that, I think we are good to we are good to go to the first question, which we should be asked to our panelists. So here we are. Uh, this is the first question. Would like to have a comment from our panelist. Employees, what do you think that implies key expectation from senior leaders post COVID-19, post lockdown? I would say that. So I would request to start from Julie and then Mujeeb, and if Helen join meanwhile.
Okay, thank you very much. Good question. I think the first thing to remember is that it's the first time for all of us. It's the first time for leaders just as much as it is the first time for employers and employees. So expectations are probably going to be fairly high, but remembering always we're not ahead of you in any way. We're just really with you in this journey. But the first expectation is that people want to have a job to return to, and they would be looking for some sort of cultural environment that they're used to. Most importantly, for the leaders, therefore, to show strong governance and leadership, to provide a clear roadmap as to what it is that they're thinking about where they should be going, to make it very clear to the employees where the accountabilities are and the planning, and to engage the workforce in that. So to really engage the workforce, and we'll talk about that more, I'm sure, through this, in talking about their experiences, the challenges, the opportunities that arose, and reviewing what was normal and what could be normal in the future in regard to that earlier question. So I think the quality of the engagement of the workers to the work decision makers is really important. Employees will be expecting to be respected and to be valued for the role that they can play in contributing to the shape of the business in the future. So I think to position the business so that it can move forward, but positioning it with clear, strong leadership and governance is, I think, what employees will be looking for.
I think in addition to what Julie spoke about around the expectations that employees will have from organizations, if you really look at it as we go through this change, and as Julie very rightly said, everybody's going through this for the first time. There has been trial and error. And as we look at, from our vantage point, as we look at different industries, they've responded to it. There are foundational things that are very, very similar. However, based on their nuances, the response is also very specific and geared towards what's happening in those industries. And I think the other key interface that has an impact on these expectations is the specific geographical country dynamics that might exist as a result of the various mechanisms that governments have created in those geographies. But I think if we drill it down to a really simple organizational level, the first expectation that employees would have, again, in addition to what Julie has spoke about already, I think is the organization's concern and help in employees' health and safety. Is the organization taking all requisite steps to ensure that employees' health and safety is prioritized? Whether that includes, providing support to them, providing support to their family. So having an infrastructure, I think, for organizations that truly, a lot of organizations talk about this in their policy manuals, in their value systems. But this is the time when the rubber is hitting the road. Are you transforming whatever you've talked about and written and say in nice town halls, actually in practice? Are you putting it to work? Are you really putting your people first and giving them? I'll give you a couple of examples. Whether it's extending any support that people need to work from home. Whether it's providing the flexibility for people to care for anybody who might be affected by this particular disease in their family or in their loved ones. So there can be several other examples, I think, that employees would expect their companies to have. Similarly, I think communication, transparency and frequent communication is another expectation that employees will have. They would want their employers to be updating them regularly on, what's going on with their specific job functions, as well as with their company, with their organization. What steps is their organization taking to facilitate, to help them meet their business needs? And lastly, I think within communication, something that I've experienced from a global perspective across our, S&P Global has offices in more than 70 different locations. And one thing that we've seen in our global town halls and town halls that I do across the globe is people are very interested in knowing what is an organization like ours doing to create impact in communities that we serve. How are we helping the community that we operate in? What steps are we taking to support, provisioning of medical equipment to our first responders? How are we helping people who are daily wagers and are impacted, especially in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, where we have a high proportion of that? So the S&P Global Foundation, gave a couple of $1 million. There was a lot of, I was frankly surprised, a lot of our employees really want to get engaged with that initiative, and they want to find a way to give back to their community. So that's a trend. I think, I'm not sure if that would have been in the top 3 over the last, if you did this this happened 5 years ago. But I think that's something that's also coming out as an expectation. Welcome, Helen. You can go next.
Yep. So Helen, welcome on board. Ladies and gentlemen, let me quickly introduce Helen Argyrou. She is innovative clinical psychologist, peak performance expert, and speaker of change leader. She is basically has a special talent in integrating science and spirituality. That's a very interesting topic. And her contribution as a female leaders of the future. So she's working a lot for the leaders. She's also delving in neuroscience, where she trained and developed thought leaders and paradigm shifters. Thank you so much for your time, Helen, and we welcome you on board. You're mute, Helen.
Good morning, everybody. Morning, my time, side of the world. It's lovely to be with you all. So great points from both speakers so far. Thank you so much, Julie and Mujeeb. And for me, I want to just highlight some of these points and also just give you my perspective of really looking right now to heart-based leadership. I think most employees and most people on the ground really are sitting with a lot of confusion and a lot of shock right now, not knowing what the future is looking like. So having the right leadership is really an important aspect for us all to be developing. I think those who are already leaders are going to be asked to step up and start to provide a much more growth mindset for employees. At the moment, navigating this future challenge is going to be, I think, a big task, because a lot of change is coming from what we're going through, and there might be more. So really leaders who are able to show a compassionate stand, who are very developed in their EQ, their emotional intelligence, is a very important factor. So I think employees, like you were saying, Mujeeb, are really expecting their leaders to show this kind of emotional integrity, either in the way they work on the communities, the way that they understand their staff, the way that they're navigating the tension that people are feeling on a daily basis. So really humanizing workplaces, very important. I think one thing that's struck me and a lot of the people that we've been speaking to in these days, we've been running a lot of summits with global international leaders, is the fact that right now we are forced to deal with diversity and inclusion as a whole human race more than ever before. And so this concept of just me and my business and what I think is no longer operational. We have to think more globally. So this global growth mindset, how are we all in it together? How are all businesses working? How do we collaborate to build a new future or shift the paradigm for the future is a very important thing. And I see a lot of employees are also responding to people that have a global vision. So managing teams in a new way, elevating the quality of communication to be a really genuine interaction between leader and employee with other employees, being able to be more transparent, I think is really important. To be able to include emotions in what's going on is somehow something we can no longer avoid. And really the business solutions, virtual systems that we have to now manage are top of the list. So we have a question, I think, about really, are we being pushed into the digital age much quicker with all of this? And I think, yes, we are. But of course, there's what we call in psychology a shadow to everything. Even a pebble has a shadow. So there's a shadow to being online, to having the digital age thrust upon us like this. There is a shadow, and we'll need to navigate that. So I think employees are also feeling quite stunned by how much is expected of them in this new digital remote working phenomenon. And there's a lot of strain from that. I myself have worked online for many years, so I know this shadow of technology can be quite isolating and quite dehumanizing. So we're going to have to navigate those kinds of challenges, and I think leaders will have to also think about how to still humanize the workplace because of that. And then, of course, quite rightly said as well, the real sustainability issue and how do you sustain human resource, both human resource and planetary resources, is again something that senior leaders are going to have to put on their list. I think on some level, we all have to start thinking more about how to create a more sustainable planet, a more sustainable workforce, and a more sustainable future.
Wow, so that's really great. So we got very interesting perspective from the topic number one, where I think most of the points were around people, like everybody, every employee will be more concerned from their leaders that how they're putting them first, as Mujeeb mentioned that whatever they were talking during the town halls, now people want to see this really in practice. And the same is the case with the Julie, who mentioned that people want to be valued. And as Helen mentioned, that sustainable human resource. So I think that is the one area which we got a perspective from our respectable panelists, that this is what they believe is the expectation from the employees. So employees want to know that how the leaders will put them first during these challenging times when the COVID and the lockdowns will get over, how they will be valued. So with that, let me put question and answers for our audience. So we take 2 to 3 questions on this specific topic. I would request to the participants, we have other topics to cover as well. Let's try to concise our questions specifically to this question only. What will be your expectation from the leaders post-COVID? So if you have some questions around it, please feel free to throw. Yep, so we got, yeah, so we have one question. If I just request Mujeeb to answer and the rest will follow. What will be the new normal with the culture, do you think, after the COVID-19? I think from the organization point of view.
Yeah, I think we've all three of us spoke a little bit about it, and I think Helen summed it up really nicely. I think as leaders and organizations adapt to the changing circumstance around us, an example of which what all of us are going through. Empathy and emotional intelligence, I think, is a super critical trait for leaders, always has been, even when you were in the traditional workspace. I think the importance of that becomes even more, really trying to put, because I've, from the 3,000 or 4,000 people that sort of fall in my purview, and all the conversations I've had with them and other people out of the 20,000 or so employees that we have at S&P. And then from my vantage point, as you mentioned, Ali, from representing the technology industry in Pakistan that employs close to 200,000 people, we've done surveys, we've done similar webinars where we really tried to understand what are people what are people expect, what challenges are people facing. People just want us to understand their circumstance. So I think when you speak about the new normal, the most critical element is how effectively are leaders able to put themselves in their employees or the people that they work with, their colleagues' shoes, and really understand what challenges might they be facing. Everybody has unique circumstances. Developing the empathy and the emotional intelligence to be able to understand that, I think, as I said, it was always important. This was taught as a subject when you went and tried to learn about leadership. I think it's going to become a lot more pertinent as we move forward. I think technology, there's some comments and questions about it as well, especially for our colleagues on the panel with me, in a country like Pakistan, where digital economy or digitizing payments was there. I mean, there was penetration of credit cards and online platforms, etc., but they were not being used too much. Nowadays, it has certainly gone up by 20, 25%, if not more. There are certain people that don't, you know, you don't have an option. You can only buy online groceries, right? So I think pushing and leveraging technology, continuing to leverage and build, and which in turn generates new demand in that sector as well. So the talk around the fourth industrial revolution, and I see questions around AI, I think that's when you talk about the new normal, people getting comfortable with digital and with technology and using technology to solve everyday problems, I think is going to become a more integral component of this new normal as we look towards the future. So just to summarize, two things that I feel will be part of the new normal: more empathy, more emotional intelligence, more humanizing the workforce. I love that phrase from Helen, I think. And then secondly, continuing to mainstream and leverage technology that will help us solve problems. Imagine our world right now if we didn't have online payment systems. Imagine a world if we didn't have online grocery delivery. It would be, you know, I'm having a drink that I got delivered, that I ordered online from my groceries. This would not have been possible if we did not have the technology available. So I think that is going to define how our new normal looks like.
Great. So we got a few interesting questions. So I'll take one more question and then we'll move to the second point. So I would request Julie to answer this question. That is, statistics shows that people working from home are more productive. Can it be the plan to continue with 30 to 40% implies continue work from home? Is it rather request?
So let me clarify. So is the question that is working from home the best way to go? Is that the question?
Yes, like, yeah, that's similar lines. So
certainly it's more comfortable.
Will it be the future where 30 to 40% of people will be working from home?
Okay. So I don't know exactly what that new normal will look like, but we all know that working from home, if you're in an environment that you're comfortable in and you don't have extra pressures, being at home can be quite comfortable. But if you are in a home environment where you're the principal carer, or you've got children or grandparents or elderly to look after, and particularly for women, I think this is they're disproportionately disadvantaged in the current environment because of that. But for others that I have always worked, you know, I always, with my global work, am at home working at some point because this is, you know, how I can do that as a global business. However, so for me, it's business as usual, but for others, it's very extreme vulnerabilities associated with it, and their isolation can be a significant thing. So relating to the questions that we raised in the first question, you know, being aware of how the individual is just as much as how the collective organisation is, just as much as how the society is. We must look at all the layers around the benefits of working from home. On the other hand, if you look at a sociological sort of perspective, I think working from home will really fast track some diversity inclusion targets, because we're not measured therefore or thereby our physical or our cultural or our differences aren't as so apparent, because we're able to contribute. So there'll be some strengths in all of that, I think, that organisations can really have a good look at. And we can, as a society, start to recognise that it's not about what we look like or who we are, it's about our skill sets. And so going then on from that, the thinking for the future about working from home will also impact your decision making on skills. And I do think there's going to be a shift in the way people look at the skills of the future as a result of it. Some people may embrace this time and be upskilling themselves by participating in forums like this. They might be undertaking study because they recognise there's an area of growth in the future. We're being very clear about essential services, but there are many other skill sets that are becoming apparent that would be useful to have. And I'm sure parents and family advisors and teachers and young people themselves are starting to reconsider, hey, you know, the skill set that I was thinking about may not be transferable as much in the future as I thought it might be. And in fact, some of these industries that I've never even thought of, I can do that, even if I wasn't traditionally one that I would have thought about. And so I think they're working from home will shift our thinking around that as well. And that's a very positive thing as far as, you know, I'm concerned. The other thing is we can manage our lives sometimes a bit better by working from home. And there's many, many advantages for people. But I think it really, that question is so broad. And yes, for the individual, they could make the decision about where its value is. But for the rest of us as leaders, as thought leaders, as encouraging thinking, you know, as a collective, we should be drawing out the awareness of those that are perhaps a bit isolated from that particular issue and having a look at what it means and how can we address it. But for diversity and inclusion, I think it's a very big winner. And I'm really pleased about that. But apart from that, wearing your casual clothes at home is very nice. And I'm sure people are feeling much more comfortable about, you know, sitting at their laptops and being comfortable as well. So that's a general answer. I'm sure the others may have something else to contribute.
Very
All right.
quickly.
Yep. Please go.
Just to add to that, you know, completely agreed with what I think Julie mentioned, especially around diversity and inclusion, and this being a great tool. And several organizations globally, as well as, again, geographies where I have more insight in, already deploy some of these tools and technologies to enable some key factors. You know, an example, we have we've provided the ability to differently abled people so that instead of commuting to work every day, they have the possibility to work from home. We provide them a home-based setup. This enables them to still be able to, provided they have the requisite skill set, just the fact that they're differently abled doesn't restrict them to not be able to work for us. Similarly, flexible work arrangements are something that organizations do. So I think to the question that do we see eventually organizations having 30 to 40% people work from home? I think, as Julie said, it's very difficult to quantify that. I think it will continue to evolve with the organization. Is it a great tool for organizations to leverage? And this unfortunate time has proven that? Absolutely, yes. A lot of organizations were already leveraging it. The hope is, you know, that more and more organizations leverage and invest in technology, in skill development that allows them to utilize this to further this particular opportunity.
Great. So we will take the response from Helen for the question answer for the next topic for the sake of time. Helen, I hope you're fine with that. So, right. So I'll be moving to the second important point for all my respectable panelists. What is the senior leadership behavior with employees post-COVID? So one was like, what was the key expectation from the first we talk about what was the employees' key expectation from the leaders. Now we would like to know what is the senior leadership behavior, how they will be behaving with the employees post-COVID. What is their expectation from the employees after the COVID, because they need to work on business growth. So they will have certain expectation from their employees how to work in a new normal. So we would like to know your perspective on that.
Thank you so much, Ali. Great answers to the previous question, and lovely that everyone's asking these great questions. It's helping us all brainstorm and build the future as we go. So for me, it's been quite interesting to speak to different people, both on lives and on the interviews I've had with guests at the moment, to really get a bit of an on-the-ground perspective. And what I found very interesting in my own thinking is that we really have an opportunity now for leaders to practice this brilliant skill of being situational leaders, which means they look at the situation and they have to intuitively, impulsively, spontaneously come up with solutions, organize the workforce. So this is really what's happening now in the limbo transitional time. There's another style of leadership called facilitative leadership, which means allowing the group to develop some of the wisdom that we have as groups together, and leaders that are able to step back a little and let their workforce guide them into what they're needing. They do surveys, they're really managing to work situationally. So I think for the limbo time, leaders have this to do. As we go through and we start looking at a new future of business, I think it would be a very interesting opportunity for leaders to begin to actually do some deeper training themselves. And to do that, what was coming out of the lives, which was really interesting as a brainstorm solution, was potentially leaders could be stepping back from the business enough so that they actually have time to both prepare and plan for the future of their business. And to do that is not an easy task. So they will need some training. They will need to catalyze all kinds of resources within themselves to begin to step to a new elevated position of leadership. And in order to do that logistically, they could be setting up a little task force, perhaps even giving more power, more initiative, delegating a little bit to certain employees or certain managers in their business, the job of taking care of COVID damage control, let's say, and even implementing a few transitional methods and putting them in place for now so that they themselves can take care of themselves to prevent burnout, because I think this is a very important key area right now that we all need to be talking more about, to actually step back from the business so that they're not getting a lot of the fear, anxiety, and what we call projection in psychology from the employees who might be very anxious, and actually start doing the job of learning how to lead the future of this business. And to do that, I would also be thinking that really getting some support for it would be really great, and to actually start looking at how they're going to navigate an entire future of either getting more people to work at home or thinking how to cut loose some ties from the past that perhaps they cannot continue to work in. So there's going to be a lot of change that's needed. This change management, as we're saying, takes some time and takes some elevated leadership skills. So I think they would need to make some time and energy available to be able to do that upgrade. Having said all of that, I just want to add on to the previous question and tie it in here. We have enormously concerning levels of burnout in the West. And I think we have different aspects of, let's say, difficult functioning or dysfunctionality in business systems around the world, not just in the West. But the burnout factor is very important. And I think the fact that people now are looking at working at home could be a potential solution, both for leaders and for employees on that factor. So if we have, 30% of people taking a 4-day week or even a 3-day week and working the other days at home, this could be a really good solution for more than just pollution and COVID. It could be a solution for burnout as well. So I think we have to navigate, however, the emotional tone of the future as leaders. And anyone running a business right now needs to know that in the future, it's not just, I would say, back to normal. There is kind of no new normal. We're going to have to create a future where we are a bit more mindful now of people's emotional stress more than ever before, because there will be, I predict, a lot of germ phobia, a lot of health questions. There are countries saying, in fact, South Africa saying that they will need 1.5 years to totally clear the concern of infection long-term, because we have now what's called viral shedders, which are people who carry the virus but don't show the symptoms ever. And that now means that we could be having interactions out there with people that do carry the virus that eventually need to be tested. So this could be a long process. And for that, of course, the EQ is still on the list as well, very important. And also just being very mindful that health and safety has to be on the list at all times. Thank you.
Okay, you happy for me to give an answer there, Ali?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that, well, as a workforce planner, subject expert, I always get asked the question about the future and what are future scenarios for businesses to consider. Now, what is really important is that we need to remember no one can predict the future, but we can consider what we call plausible future scenarios. And so leaders should be looking at what their plausible future scenarios were anyway in the pre-COVID-19 environment. And I think when you look at them, it's important to keep them very specific. That you're either in growth, you're in decline, or in status quo, no change in a number of areas. And most importantly, you should also be considering plausible scenario related to the wild card. And I don't know that many companies would have been using COVID-19 wildcard in the past, but so plausible futures are really important for leadership to be looking at. And also if they've been doing good workforce planning in the past, and they've been considering traditionally you would consider your current workforce state, your future workforce state, and the transition to the future workforce state. There's three sort of natural steps in workforce planning. Well, as Heleniq has said, the transition workforce now we've been thrown into that, and that is what we need to be looking at in that transition workforce. So I would say that in considering the leadership issue, of course, they must be looking at engaging the workforce in that. So direct and real engagement of the workforce in the thinking about what the business could look like in the future. And also strengthening the thinking. So, we often go straight to workforce planning or this sort of planning without really giving strategic thinking a go. And strategic thinking is very important. It's where you really don't focus on the solution, but you focus on what the thinking is about all of these issues. And then you look at the planning around possible solutions. So strategic thinking before strategic planning, if you like. And I agree with Helen that there was the opportunity to engage particular workforces or subsets of the workforce in that strategic thinking. And you might be surprised where the strategic thinkers in your organisation are. Often they're creatives, and people with creative ability can do this quite well. So I would say that for the leaders, their principal goal, of course, is to get the business going again, keeping it, rebuilding the culture, a different culture maybe, or building on what is the positive elements. Remember, don't let COVID-19 be your, set the agenda for the future. The leaders must show up with strong governance, and they must be leading the future in that way. So I would say that that's really, what I just want to say in the context of good workforce planning. We're saying have plausible strategic futures, but think about them before you try to create solutions to them, and do that in a very systematic and skilled way.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is obviously affirm what I can share from experience that both what Helen and Julie spoke about, which is really delegating and forming a task force. That's exactly what we did. We formed a global task force that had people from all across the world, from different segments of the organization, that was tasked with coming up with all policy measures. They were empowered to make decisions. They were empowered to communicate those decisions out to people. And, I don't have any wood around me, so I'll just cross my fingers. I don't want to jinx it. So far, we've been able to, we feel, handle it pretty effectively. And that empowerment really meant that people felt involved. They felt that, we were doing this based on looking out for their health and safety. And I mean, what's the balance? The balance is for any business to balance employee health and safety with their client's interest. That's sort of what's driving all of this, right? So I think that expectation or that consideration, absolutely fully agreed. I think that works. The only element I'll add, in addition to what Helen and Julie spoke about, which is spot on, is around technology. And especially, again, for this part of the world, for the developing piece of the world, we still see a lot of people. So about 50% of our workforce is in India, Pakistan, and Philippines. And when we wanted them to get to work from home, We faced domestic internet issues. People didn't have high-speed internet in their residences. So how can we work? How can leaders work and influence that when they work with local governments and exert any influence in getting access to the right technology infrastructure that can support all of this in the long term? And again, it's just not about work. It has other angles, just like Helen very rightly pointed out. It's a key driver. In, for example, in the Philippines, average commute time for people is about 2.5 hours. It's a congested city. Public transport is strained. It's a challenge for people, and it is a huge value add when you can give them the ability to work from home, even 2 days a week. Buenos Aires, we tried this for the last couple of years. People take a day off and work from home one day. Uh, Amazing benefit that people really, really value. The point I want to make, very, very quickly, technology enablement, both from the organization's perspective. On the flip side, I've seen a lot of technology companies not having the right infrastructure to be able to deal with something like this in this sort of a situation. And so on that point, I think the thing that both Julie and Helen spoke about around strategic thinking, really thinking ahead, what the future of my workforce looks like, what infrastructure and policies and procedures do I need to have in place to support that future workforce? What kind of talent engagement do I need to do for that future workforce? If that's how we think about it, I think it will help us not only deal with this situation, but also a key behavior that will drive us growth in the future as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that very detailed answer to the question. I would request, because we have 12 minutes left now, so we'll have a few very nice questions. I would humbly request panelists to concise your quick answer to 1 minute to 1.5 minutes, so that we get more questions. For the second topic, participants are feel free to share your questions. I got the first question with me. And I think I would say I would start with Helen now. Helen, the question is, certain businesses might shut down after COVID. So this is the fear people are having now. So the question is, what is your advice with which route people should take for a potential diversification? So if you could just shed a brief light on that.
I really love this question, and I'm sure it's not the best answer for all of us, but I do think it's on the right track. I want to really encourage everybody listening that feels fear or feels concern about what's going on to think about this time as a time of great change. This is an epic time in human history. Many of us will never see something like this again. Many of previous generations have not been through something like this. And as frightening as it is, it's really something transformational. So if you are feeling a little scared or concerned about the future, perhaps it's useful to think about it as a beginning moment for you to change a few things that were not working or were not useful for you. I'm going to leave it there and just add one more word. It is a paradigm shift for all of us. What paradigm shift could be brilliant and very powerful for your life? There are going to be new businesses opening up with a totally new perspective and new objectives, and perhaps you're better suited, better aligned to some of those. So yes, there is a little bit of difficulty before we navigate and become born again into the future. And yes, we have to go through some difficulty, and that's part of change, that's part of transformation. So I want to encourage people to face this challenge and to think in a way where they can create something new and more suitable for themselves in their life, even if it means getting a new job. Maybe becoming an entrepreneur. We don't know. There are amazing opportunities unfolding right now as we speak.
That's great. Anybody would like to add anything in this question, or we should move to the second one?
Just very quickly, 30 seconds. I think just Helen again, is spot on. I think upskilling and sort of reskilling yourself for how the world is changing was already a theme. This just presents an excellent opportunity and excuse for us to really do it. And a lot of people, I think, if they can use this opportunity, if you look at it as an opportunity to transform themselves, I think they will be able to make use of the tremendous opportunity and new models that might come up in the future.
All right, so fine. We have another good question. Uh, yeah, so that's like leaders should have shared short or long-term strategy with employees for new normal in elaborate manner to give them confidence regarding sustainability of related business. So I think that email should go to your line manager, Rashid. One of the participants gave a suggestion. I think that is the good suggestion, and that should lead to the organization and leadership. Any other question, guys? We take the last question. Yeah, so one question, Julie, I would request to take the question. What do you guys think that COVID given us a push towards digitalization quickly, where we would have been after multiple given years? This has given it a push to be there soon. I think we had talked a little bit about it. All of us, like as Mujeeb mentioned, that technical and infrastructure should be ready if we really want to work from home, and other things. Maybe Julie, if you would like to add in something, and then we'll go to the last part of the session.
Could you? I didn't quite hear that clearly. So if you could say it again.
Yeah. So do you think that business got a push towards digitalization?
Oh, okay. I think so. I think that some people are already on the road to that, because that was a natural transformation that most businesses have been thinking about and doing in one way or another. For others, it would be a greater shift. Small businesses that have not in the past provided digital online services or invoicing, anything, whatever they were doing, they would be a bit more fast-tracked, I suppose. The thing is that is not different is that any organisation that wants to position themselves to compete for the workforce that they require needs to understand both the labour market and the industrial environment in which they are working, as well as the people that they wish to engage. So the digital push can't be it on it, alone in that way. I mean, it needs to be skills and capabilities and that they need to make their business competitive in the market that they're in. So I think if one of those skills is digital capacity, well, yes, but not for all organisations, of course. But certainly there is no doubt that this environment has fast-tracked the digital thinking, and some people are more comfortable with it than others. And as has been said often already, there will be many that will maximise this opportunity and turn out to be offering something different. Their services and products will be different.
That's great. Any last input from Helen, and then we'll go to the key takeaways.
I just want to highlight that I think it's really important to be really practical and realistic about this, that we have new products, new services that need to be developed, and the online, as we said before, is not just one wonderful solution. It has its challenges, and it's not a one size fits all for all businesses either. So we all need to be a little bit more critical in our thinking about how we're going to create suitable strategies and schedules for the future. Yeah.
All right. Any 30 seconds for Mujeeb on that, if you would like.
I think that's been answered already. I spoke about it as well, so we can just.
Great. So that's amazing. Now I'm talking to the participants of the webinar. So we see a lot of wonderful thoughts from your side. We got a lot of great questions. But my point to you is, like, questions are always better than answers. So we got a lot of questions. We are not able to answer all the questions because of the time. But please keep your questions with you. We'll try to share the answers later on, and during the upcoming webinars, you can ask those questions again, because we love those questions. Those questions are very important, but because we had limited time, we were able to choose the questions which were best valued for the people. And we'll try to answer the rest of the questions through to the email later on. Now, last part of the conversation, we left with 4 minutes now. Would be very happy to have one key learning from yourself, from our amazing business leaders from across the globe. They have, I think, there are for a lot of learning for me as well, like Julie, Helen, and Mujeeb. I think they are seasonal leaders. So just share in the chat box, what is the one key takeaway? One is the one action which you believe that you will take forward after this COVID or after this webinar. Please feel free to put it there. So we got the first one already. Need humanizing the workplace. Wow. I think that's a beautiful tagline. Humanizing the workplace. I love that. So that is the one takeaway. Guys, please feel free to share your takeaways in a chat box, and our panelists would be just have a little bit conversation on that, not answering that. Julie, Helen, and Mujeeb, feel free to comment on, you can open the chat box and you can see what people are writing about their key takeaways from today's session. So we got first, humanizing the workplace, digitally, be digitally ready. I think that's another good takeaway from the audience. And if they could just, I think that is the message to the whole organizations. That can be
just quickly comment on that. I think that's, and again, from a local construct, and as well as other areas, I can speak for at least a couple of other places in the region. That continues to be a key deficiency, if I may call it that. Both when it comes to actions that can be taken at the policy level with governments, as well as at the organization level with, I'm sorry again to go a little more technical, but the talk around cloud first has been going on for quite some time. Organizations that made that transition or were further along in that transition in using cloud-based technologies as key systems within their company or within their workflows, this was a very easy shift for them. Organizations that still had traditional data center or hardware non-cloud-based infrastructure, they had a more difficult time doing this. And that's what we've seen. That's what's going to translate into impact as well. So no question around being digitally equipped, digitally available, digitally ready. I think it's super important.
Great. So with that, like we got a few more very nice. Right time to upskill. I think that's something like working on your own self paradigm shift, beautifully written by Saad. And then we got one from Heather as well. Promote that balance between technology and human. That's very important, because we were moving very fast in the technology, but now with the virus, we got to know that humans are there. They're important as well. That's very nice. So I think with that, I would humbly go to the last step of the session today, and which is what is the next step? The next step is basically we would request all of our participants to draw a simplest drawing, a learning, whatever, like the future of the organization, which you feel like post-COVID, based on the conversation, based on the paradigm shift, I would say you had today, just draw something. And you can send us through WhatsApp, you can send us through email, because as I said, 60% of your learning will be enhanced if you draw something. Doesn't matter you're not, I can share a video shared with by one of my friend, a TED video. Whoever feel, even I feel that I'm not good in drawing, but by watching that video, you'll be able to know you can draw. So by drawing, your learning will be extended further. So please send it to us before tomorrow. the the finalists and the winners will be shared on LinkedIn. So we would request our panelists to give their view once we'll get those things. So with that, I would lastly say individual and personalized thanks to Helen. Thank you so much, Helen, for your time and amazing input. Same is the case with Julie. Thank you so much for taking your time, and your views were really life-changing for us, for all of us. And Mujeeb, very kind of you being available and giving your humble thoughts, amazing input to all of us. I think our participants, thank you so much to the participants. You are really engaging. Your thoughts, your questions, as I say again, we might not be able to answer all the questions, but we love your questions, we love your input, and we will be looking forward to have your drawing today or tomorrow. And we can't wait to share it on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, panelists.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you very much, Ali. And I just wanted to say I felt that I learned a lot, and I felt very thrilled to be a part of a global family. It feels like you're all sharing a meal together with me. It's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ali, for making such a wonderful host, and to all of you out there listening, sharing your wisdom. I think we did that all together. Facilitative leadership, all of us really learning together. Thank you so much to the guests as well, Mujeeb and Julie. Lovely to meet you and share space with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, and looking forward to have good learning out of this webinar.
Take care. Bye, Julie. Bye, Helen.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.